Hello everybody and welcome to our comprehensive cybersecurity training. As many of you know, we do this on a regular basis and this month is our comprehensive cybersecurity training. The reason that we do this is to keep your team up to date on what is going on, and there's a lot of activity going on in the industry right now, so it's really important, more so than ever. We've updated this entire presentation this year. These are all brand new slides, so with that, let's get into it. All right, first question is why? Why would you even have your team watch this? Well, small and medium-sized companies are under attack more now than ever before. Why is that? Well, it's kind of simple economics, really. You have all these bad guys that have $1 billion industry, and then you have these big companies that are putting in millions and millions of dollars worth of protection to keep the bad guys out. Well, they're having trouble getting into those bigger companies. So what do? Well, they change their business model. Now what they're going to do is go after the smaller companies that have less security in place. That's you. So it's important that your team is trained. The majority of the attacks that happen right now are on small businesses. They have the same level of high expertise in the hackers, but they're concentrating on small to medium-sized businesses right now. So you're more vulnerable now than you ever have before. What does that look like? Well, we get reports on a daily basis of all sorts of different attacks that are going on or prevented or happening. These are just a few of them. There are all sorts of new ways. Essentially, the bad guys are like a river going through, and they're looking for new ways to get through that barrier and through that. So what they do is they keep coming up with new ways. In this presentation, we're going to go through those. We're going to show you some of the new ones that have been that they've come up with, so you can protect your team on it. First off, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the current landscape. What does it look like right now in this point in time? What does the security landscape look like? Then we're going to talk about your network. What do you need to have in place to make sure that you are protected? Then we're going to start talking about the human element. This is really important. This is going to be the most important part of this presentation. It's going to be the human element, because online safety and social engineering is our biggest battle right now. We're going to go through real life examples of actual hackings that have actually happened and what you can look out for with your team. We're going to talk about the protections that you can put in place, and then we're going to talk about reinforcements of what to do on best practices, and then at the end we're going to offer a free assessment that you can run to see how you are. All right, so first off, a little bit about us. So we are Braver Technology Solutions. We're a managed service provider. We're up in the Northeast. We've been around for 30 years. So we've been doing this for a really long time, and we've seen a lot of changes in the industry. We serve a lot of different industries, and we basically do IT for those industries. Some of you are clients of ours, some of you are not, but I hope either way you get a lot out of this presentation. All right, so why quarterly? That's probably the biggest question that we have. Why would you keep training your staff quarterly? Well, cybersecurity training is just like going to the gym. If you go once, you're not really going to see a lot of results out of that effort. So you have to go over and over and over again in order to see the results, in order to see that what your team keep your team up and running and up to date on what's happening. Again, if you go to the gym once, you're not going to see anything. You got to repeat it over and over again. There will be things that you hear during this presentation that you may forget, that you come back later on and say it again. It's like, oh, all right, that makes sense. I remember that, because we're going to go through a lot in this presentation. The reason that we're recording it, the reason that we're putting it up online for free for you and your team to watch, is so that you can watch it over and over and over again. This is something that we just offer you, and we want you to be secure. All right, let's talk about the threat landscape. Right now, we have a perfect storm going on in the cybersecurity realm. And it's three things, really. We have an industry, meaning that the hacker industry, that is highly profitable right now. They can make a lot of money right now. So there's a high reward on doing hacking. There are ads that go out overseas looking for people to hack. They have job boards and everything else, just like regular jobs and functions, looking for people to be hackers or to be social engineering experts. They have training programs, they have onboarding programs, they have all the stuff that you would have as a good business. Next, we have a lack of law enforcement. It's not a lack of law enforcement, it's a lack of resources for law enforcement. Law enforcement has a lot of different areas that they're tracking down and working on. Cybercrime only accounts for about 3% of the law force out there, because obviously there's a lot involved in that. So that means that there are very little resources to actually find these people when something happens. Then they're using a currency that's untraceable. We're going to touch on that a little bit later on. That's another problem. Once the cat's out of the bag, we have a problem. We're going to touch on that a lot later on. The last thing that we have is if they do get caught, there's a very low penalty. So there's not much risk involved in that. A lot of them are overseas, so there's almost no penalty involved whatsoever. But even in the States, there's not really strong law enforcement in place or strong regulations in place to deter them from doing this. So that gets us to where we are now. We have a perfect storm of a high reward, profitable business that is untraceable, and very low resources, and then if they do find you, it's low penalty. All right, so let's talk about data breaches. So the reason we're going to talk about data breaches, we're going to start at the big guys. We're going to start at the big guys because what happens is these data breaches, they may not mean anything to you right now, but you may not think they mean anything to you, but they really do. These data breaches are affecting you, and we're going to talk specifically about the Facebook and the T-Mobile ones later on. We're going to give you real-life examples of why those data breaches actually affect your business and your users going through. But the other thing to look at is that these are companies that are paying millions and millions and millions of dollars on their security, and they're still breached. The reason that they're breached is the human element, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But basically, that data on there at all these locations that may not seem important to you is actually extremely important. So we're going to talk about different size companies. As I mentioned, it doesn't matter what size company you are, big, medium, or small, you're a target. And no matter the size you are, you can be breached. So here's a list of all the top companies. Now the reason that they're on here is because these are the ones that make the news. The ones that don't make the news are the medium to small businesses, but these are the ones that make the headlines. But as I mentioned earlier, the hackers are going after everybody. So here's a medium-sized company that they went after, got all the and exposed them, and where there had to be a public announcement of a data breach. Here's a small company that went after. And as you can see, they had to pay a penalty on top of it because they didn't have proper regulations in place. You need to have your proper regulations in place. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well in this documentation. What you have, and then we're going to show you how you can get some sample documents that we've written up that you can use as a basis for your own internal use. Okay, we're going to start off this talking about ransomware. I want to talk about ransomware because this is the one that most people are exposed to. And I want to kind of explain the numbers behind ransomware as best I can. So ransomware is basically when the bad guys come in and they get at your data on your network and they start encrypting it. And once they encrypt it, then they ask you for a ransom. Now, they have made modifications over that over the years. How have they made modifications? Well, here's a couple of things that they've started to do differently. Number one, they've noticed that the backups were working. So at first, when they started doing ransomware, they were getting a ransom because people weren't doing offsite backups. So then what they started doing is they started attacking the backups first. And they start going after the data on the backups, knowing that if they encrypt the data on the backups before they encrypt that, there won't be anything to restore from. We're going to talk to you about how to go around that and circumvent that when we get to the network layout part of it. But essentially what they're doing is taking your data, they're encrypting it, and then asking you for a ransom. And now there's some other clever things that they're doing as well. All right, let's look at our biggest targets. The biggest targets are actually the small and medium-sized businesses. As you can see, the United States was the #1 target. Why was the United States the #1 target? Well, that's where the money is, right? So you go to the bank, you rob a bank because that's where the money is. You go to the U.S. because that's where the money is. But they're going after small to medium businesses in the U.S., which again is most likely you when you're watching this video. It's not any one industry. Looking at this chart, one of the things that I actually found very interesting is that the #1 attack is actually after manufacturing. Why is that interesting? Number one, most people would think that that's the the one that people need the least of for the data. But that data is important no matter who you are. That data is important. Also, the manufacturers probably thought that too, so they probably spent the least amount on their security. So then they ended up being hacked. So if you look at manufacturing, construction, and transportation, those three are probably the ones that most people put on the lower side of the list, with healthcare and finance being at the highest end of the list of targets to go after. But as you can see, the hackers are going after everybody. It doesn't matter which industry you're in, you're a target and you have to protect yourself. Here's the data targets, which I didn't analyze this, but it probably matches pretty close to the population and the number of businesses across the US. The next thing I want to talk about is what the hackers are getting smart at. So now what the hackers are doing is they're very smart, and they're saying, okay, a lot of the companies now are storing their data offsite. So if you're storing your data offsite, you can restore from an attack. Well, when you can restore from an attack, that takes money out of the pocket of the ransomware people. So what do they do now? Now what they do is they take your data offsite first. They export your data and they take as much of that critical data into their location as possible before they encrypt it, before they make the ransomware. Now what they're doing is they're charging an extortion fee. They're saying, oh, okay, great. Well, you can restore. You don't need to pay a ransom. Well, guess what? Looks like you have some pretty sensitive data here. We're just going to release this into the public unless you pay us a fee. And so now they've gone, again, they change their business model, they grow it. We're going to show you some other ways that they've changed their business model as well a little bit later on in this seminar. But basically, what they'll do is take your data out. So again, we want to try and get them from getting in the first place. All right, so why did this start happening? Well, I have my own theory. Which is that all these attacks seem to start happening right around the time that Bitcoin hit the market. We can trace our call logs with our clients almost right to the day and time when Bitcoin started to become popular. Why is that? Well, they finally found a way that they could get paid that was not traceable. There's a way that they can get money from you that nobody knows how to trace it. Once Bitcoin came out, that became an encrypted currency. That's when the problem started to happen. Okay, so let's talk about your network defense. We're going to talk about the things that you should have in place right now all the time. We're going to start with the most important one, which is the firewall. Firewall is what protects your computers in your office on a daily basis. It is constantly under attack. Firewall needs to be kept up to date on a regular basis. We update all of our clients' firewalls on a monthly basis. It's extremely important. All of the ports from the outside need to be closed. The only ports that should be open are the ones that are absolutely necessary for the course of business. We take on so many new clients and we do a port scan, and the next thing that we notice is that there's a bunch of ports that are open that are not necessary. One of the ones that are the scariest ones are people remoting in. That is the scariest port that we see open, is an RDP port. Your users should be remoting in through an SSL VPN. They should not have an open RDP port. I can't stress this enough, and we still take on clients that still have that. Blows my mind. Next thing, that SSL VPN needs to have two-factor authentication enabled on it. Not just the SSL VPN, you need to have a two-factor authentication hook up to it as well. The next thing that we recommend, we have available, if you want, we have an acceptable use template for your team. This is basically what your company employees should be doing on a regular basis, spelling it out. This is going to help you on insurance applications as well, that you have an acceptable use policy. All right, next thing that is the most important thing is a strong antivirus product. You really need a strong antivirus product. We research antivirus products at least once every 2 years, sometimes once a year, to see what is the best in the marketplace, and we put that in. We recently just upgraded all of our clients to SentinelOne, which is a high-end endpoint detection product, but then we did something else. We added all of our clients, we added a 24/7 security operations center. So every single one of our clients now has 24/7 somebody watching their environment. Why is this important? This is really important because a lot of the attacks happen off hours. They happen in the middle of the night. They happen when you're not there. The bad guys know that. They're waiting that. They're just sitting and looking for you to not be there. We're monitoring during that time frame. However, we've had some very interesting scenarios. We've had a couple of them that have happened during the day. We had one where a client was a victim of a social engineering, which had nothing to do with the data. Basically, we're going to get into, we're actually going to show you a real life example of how that happened. So it has nothing to do with the security of the business. What happens, the bad guys, they were making their way, and then they got a little greedy, and they loaded a software tool on the computer. Our 24/7 SOC alerted right away and said, hey, listen, there's some suspicious activity going on. We called up the client. We're like, hey, listen, something's going on in this. Come to find out, one of their users had been socially engineered and was in the process of sending money to the bad guys. It was all caught quick enough that the bank was able to stop the transfer of funds before it even happened. That's a best case scenario. That's awesome. That means that small price that we're paying for that 24/7 SOC paid for itself multiple times over for that client. Next thing you want to make sure of is make sure you have a good email threat protection in place. We highly recommend the Microsoft defense product out there. There's other ones that are good as well, but Microsoft seems to be doing a really good job with their advanced threat protection / Azure Defense. They keep changing the name on it, typical Microsoft. But why do you need that? Well, if you look at the average log, so this is an average email log of emails coming in, out of 60 million emails that came in to our clients during this time frame, only 17 million were actually valid. All the rest were bad emails. And so it's really important that you have a good threat protection in place for your environment. Next thing is DNS filtering. You want to protect your users from going to known bad websites. We don't want to block them from all websites, but if a website is known to be bad, you want them to get a message up that says, this site is a bad site, you shouldn't be here. That's what the DNS filtering does. All right, next is Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is more prevalent now in business than ever before. There's typically 2 Wi-Fi. Sometimes our clients only have 1, which is bad. But essentially, usually you have your in-office Wi-Fi and your guest Wi-Fi, or that's what you should have. Ideally, if you only have a guest Wi-Fi, that's even better. In-office Wi-Fi should only be used for devices that need to attach to your environment, your servers in particular, right? That's the only time somebody should be using the in-house Wi-Fi. The guest Wi-Fi should be everything else. People's cell phones, people's tablets, anything along that lines. That should be the guest Wi-Fi. It should be on that. The majority of the devices in your office should be on guest Wi-Fi. If they're not, there's a simple solution to switch them that way. You take the internal Wi-Fi passcode, you change it, you don't tell people what it is. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, listen, I can't connect to the Wi-Fi, you say, oh, great, here's the guest Wi-Fi password. But it's really important that you get those devices on it, because those devices, when they're on your internal Wi-Fi, they're on your network. So now you have everybody's cell phone on your network. You have everybody's tablet on your network. You have people's notebooks that don't need to be on your network. Anytime you do that, you're opening yourself up for exposure. You want to limit that as much as possible. Again, ideal scenario is to have only guest Wi-Fi if you can do it. Disaster recovery imaging. This is really important. As I mentioned in the ransomware, this is what's going to save you. All right. Your internal disaster recovery should go to a external NAS device that's on your network. It should be on a separate LAN if possible. It should have a separate credentials that are not the same as your admin credentials for your server. It should have its own AD account if possible. It should not be part of your AD, rather. You want this device to be separate as possible. Basically, if there's a breach in your network, you want to make getting to those backups as difficult as possible. And that's what you want to do on this. So basically, you want to make that so you can't get to it no matter where you are. You also want to have your offsite backup, right? So the offsite backup is extremely important. So let's say there is a breach on your network and they're trying to get to your on-site backup, and heaven forbid they get to your on-site backup, the off-site backup is your only hope at that point. You need to get your data off-site to another location. The other thing I will say is that some people, so many of our clients have their data in the cloud, either a hosted server or also through like hosted applications like Teams and stuff like that. That data needs to be backed up offsite as well. There's two reasons that that data needs to be backed offsite. Number one, the retention period of those host locations, Teams, whether it be Dropbox, Ignite, whatever they are, they only have a short retention period. You need a longer retention period on that. But number two, the bad guys know where your data is. They're going to go after that data offsite just as much as they would go after that data onsite. So you need to have that data in a remote location. They're going to attack that data wherever it is. You need to have a second source of that data, otherwise you're in a vulnerable spot. Okay, that is the network layout. Those are the basic blocking and tackling that every company should have. Now, what we do for our clients is we give them a regular security scorecard. This scorecard goes through all the top level things that every organization should have. If your managed service provider does not give you something like this, ask them for something similar. Ask them to grade your network. How well are we doing? Why is this important? Well, if you look at the bottom one on this particular, this is a small screenshot of the entire scorecard, but if you look at the bottom one on this, you can see it says SSL VPN in place, right? And it's a concern. And that's something we've had in our scorecard for 3 years now. Now, you know who could have really benefited from this was Colonial Pipeline, because that is how the hackers got into Colonial Pipeline. They got in through an SSL credential that hadn't been updated. It was an employee that hadn't worked there anymore. If it had two-factor authentication on it, the hackers could not have gotten in and disrupted their entire business model. Simple blocking and tackling not taking place. You really need to do this. The next thing I want to talk to you about is what you want to have in place as a company. You want to have a business continuity plan. Now, I have good news for you. We wrote up a template that is free for you to get. Here's the website for it. You can get this and modify it to however you need for your company. This is going to be really helpful when you're talking to your insurance providers as well. They're going to be looking for a business continuity plan from you. We've already gone through the effort of putting together a template. Feel free to grab this. Here's the website for it. We have some other free content that we're going to be showing you as well. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is probably the most important part of this, which is the human element. We're going to start getting into this really quick. Okay. So we're going to talk about social engineering. I'm going to start with social engineering because this is the toughest part of your job. This is the toughest thing you have. Why is that? Because we can't protect on it on the technical level. There's no tools that we can put in place to help your engineers, your people, not get socially engineered. What is social engineering? Social engineering is when you have bad actors coming in and either pretending to be somebody else they are, or acting or using information that they have, and contacting your team directly, whether it via phone call, email, or we're going to show you one of the most successful ones in a little bit of how they're getting in touch with your team directly. They're bypassing all of your physical security measures, all of the technical security measures, and they're going after the human weakness. Let's go through a couple real life examples of what that looks like. Okay. Let's say I'm a bad guy, right? Some people would say I'm a bad guy, but let's say for the sake of argument, I'm a really bad guy. And let's say I start reading an article about a new building that's going up. And I think to myself, well, how can I expose this? Well, I can expose this in a bunch of different ways. I'm going to give you one way that I could expose it. What I'm going to do as a bad guy, I'm going to find out who the general contractor is that's putting up that building. I'm going to call that general contractor and I'm going to say, hey, listen, you know what? We're also in the area, in the Boston area, let's say, and we're also looking for an HVAC vendor. Are you happy with your HVAC vendor? Do you like what they're doing? And if you are, do you mind giving us some contact information? Yeah, we love them. They're doing a great job. They're doing excellent. I'm more than happy to give your contact information. Here they are. Great. So this is building XYZ, going through. Now that I have the general contractor for that HVAC, what am I going to do? I'm going to call that HVAC vendor and I'm going to say, hey, listen, we're the general contractor. I'm representing the general contractor of the building that's going up right now. You guys are doing a spectacular job for us. Love what you're doing for us. Everything's going great. I want to make sure you guys get paid on time. So in order to do that, can you just verify the amount that we owe you? Can you verify when it's due? And also who I should be sending the payment to? Oh, yeah, definitely. You bet. I'd love to give you, if I'm a accounts receivable person, I'm going to love to give you that information without a doubt. I love getting paid on time. So they're going to give that information out without thinking twice about it. Great. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to wait until a few days before that due date. I'm going to call the original general contractor for the building and say, hey, yeah, I'm with the HVAC company that's going through. I hope everything is going well. I hope we're taking good care of you. Here's an invoice that I know that you know that we have due. Here's when it's due. Here's all the information. By the way, we've updated our payment portal. Here's now how you pay us for that. I have all the information that I need to make it look legitimate. I know how much it is. I know when it's due. I know who I'm supposed to emulate in the contact information. And basically that general contractor is now going to send that money to the wrong location thinking that they're paying the right invoice. I'm going to change this up even a little bit and make it a little bit scarier. Let's say the general contractor's email was breached. And so they actually can emulate the actual general contractor, and so they can, or let's say the HVAC vendor has been breached, or somebody's been breached. They can actually emulate the actual email address, and they just took a whole step out of it. They send an actual fake invoice with actual pay instructions from it, and the bad guys just pay them. Oh, you just paid the bad guy, sorry. You just paid the bad guys thinking that's the real vendor. You weren't breached. Your vendor was breached, but you ended up paying them. You did nothing wrong. Nobody on your team did anything wrong. They should have asked some questions, which is why we're going through this training. Anytime there's payment changes for any of your vendors, ask questions. Call a number that you know. Talk to a person that you know. All right, let's go through another real life scenario. I am driving down the road and I see a building with a big sign on it with a big company, and I think to myself, boy, that's a big company. I'd love to find a way that I could actually get money from that company. Well, it's actually pretty easy. Basically, you go through, you find out who's the property manager of that building that they're on, that their sign is on. Oh, all right, I'm going to call the property manager and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I'm a brand new accounts payable person for company XYZ. And you guys are great. We love the building that we're in. We love everything about it. You got the lobby's always clean, everything. We want to make sure that we pay you on time. Can I just verify the information? I'm brand new here. Can you just verify to me what the next rent payment is going to be, how much, who I have to send it to, when it is due, and who I should receive the emails from? Again, who doesn't like to be paid, right? So that building manager's, property manager's going to give that information out. Then what I do is I send a fake invoice to that tenant, company XYZ. I send a fake invoice to them that has the exact rent amount, has the exact date, and I'm pretending to be the property manager, but I'm giving them different pay instructions. I'm saying, please pay me here. The tenants pay. That pay goes on 2 to 3 months before the building manager says, hey, are you guys going to pay me my rent? I haven't seen it. That's a problem. That's a problem with all these social engineering schemes, is that what happens is it's months before anybody tracks it down. If you think about when you pay a vendor or when you pay somebody, they don't normally call you the day after the payment is due. They give you a leeway. They give you 30, 60, 90 days before they tell you, hey, listen, just so you know, we haven't received a check from you and you're usually pretty good. Guess what? That money is long gone. It's transferred over to Bitcoin. It's long sailed outside of your control. Now, so that's the problem, is that by the time that the breach has been detected, it's long gone. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, and one thing I will stress really, your accounting and finance department is not your only weak spot, but it's an extremely weak spot. And you may not think of them as your weakest link, but they are the biggest target for these guys. It's your accounting department, your accounts receivable and accounts payable. They need to be on alert more than anything else. If there's any kind of payment change of any sort, same thing with the HR, we're going to show you in that. Anything that has to do with money, you need to have that department watch this training video, and then also just talk to them. If there's anything change at all, you need to have some kind of process in place. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, these are far-fetched scenarios. I don't see them happening in real life. Well, I would beg to differ, because there was an entire town in Colorado that paid $1 million to a bridge, and you know how they got the money? Somebody went onto their website and filled out a form, and on the form they said, hey, listen, we're with the building department of a building company for this bridge. We have an updated payment, and they just submitted a form, and millions of dollars went out before anybody knew it. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, that's the government. The government's messed up. It could never happen to a real business person who's like actually intelligent. Well, it can. Because Barbara Kokorian's staff was socially engineered to pay money to bad guys using examples very similar to what I just showed you. Now, I give her huge props for actually coming out and saying it, because it'd be a lot easier and a lot less embarrassing not to say it, but it's really good that she did, because she brought this to light. Some of the things that you want to do is check on the wire transfers that go through. We put some examples up here, but by no means should you use these as your only examples, right? You need to talk to your financial institute and talk to them and ask them what policies that you can put in place with them to get you safe. Here's some examples here. They might have different ones that are, they may not be able to do some of these, or they might have different ones, but you need to do something to protect the money going in and out of your company. We also have training on our website that talks about this, that talks about, that goes through. These are 10 to 15 minute training videos. As I said before, we put out quarterly training. We only do one comprehensive one, which is this one, but then we do smaller targeted training on a regular basis. So these trainings are typically 10 to 15 minutes, and they go deep dive into the subjects that we're going on. Okay, you need to watch these. The one that you should watch more than anything else is the phishing one. Okay, let's go through phishing. So we're going to talk about phishing, and we're going to talk about the bad actors in phishing. So basically, this is the one that people are probably the most familiar with, and with phishing is essentially the goal of phishing is to try and get you to do something or manipulate you in a certain way through email messaging. All right, and we're going to go through some real life examples of phishing attacks. So let's go through those right now. Okay, so phishing is going to be emails going into your people, trying to attack your people, and trying to get them and manipulate them to do something that you don't want them to do. What does that look like? So basically, we're going to put this in 4 components to look for in a phishing email. So number 1 is accuracy. Are there grammar mistakes? Are there spelling mistakes? Does the language sound wrong? Are they talking in a format that doesn't look right? Does the URL look wrong? We're going to give you some examples of that. Does it say amazon.ca.com instead of amazon.com? Does it claim to know you or have some false information about you? Then also relevance. Is it even relevant to your industry or what you're doing? A lot of times these phishing emails go out and they go into a broad spectrum, and they're just trying to catch anybody that they can, right? And so what they'll do is you might get a request for construction material when you're in an IT company, right? So obviously that's a red flag. There's something going on. Usually it's a little off. So it might be they're asking you for a copier even though you're in the computer industry. Then that's going to be a little bit off, right? And is it from somebody that you don't know? Is it somebody that doesn't look like somebody that you know? Is there an attachment? Never open an attachment on an email that you don't know or don't suspect, right? Does the subject even make sense? Is there coercion? Does it say that there's pressure to do something, right? Is there, hey, listen, if this doesn't happen, that you're going to have something, there's going to be something bad that happens to the people in there. And then is there a sense of urgency? Does it have to be done right now? Do we need, we're having a problem right now where only you can help us. This is happening, you're the only one, like we need your help on this. Whatever it may be, is there some sense of urgency that says, hey, we're down, we're in a bad spot, we need your help, or you need to do this, or something bad will happen to you. Your account has been locked, it's been breached, there's been too many password attempts on this, there's been too many things happening that have caused you or your company harm. That's a sense of urgency that you're looking for. So these are the 4 categories that you want to have your team look for on an email that is a phishing. Let's talk about the types of phishing. There's 3 categories, 3 general categories of phishing. There's a lot more types of categories. There's 3 general categories. And we're going to show you examples of each of these. But first, let's talk about them. There's phishing in general. So phishing is the original term. And what the phishing comes from is they would throw a big net and hope to catch somebody, hence the term phishing. What they're trying to do is just throw out a broad email and hope somebody catches on. And that was somewhat effective, but then they got into spear phishing, where they actually take people in your individual organization and target them specifically. And that is spear phishing, and that's when they have like some kind of token or knowledge of things that they know what's going on, and they're going to attack them individually. And then there's whaling, where they're trying to get the big guy, right? They're trying to do something specific. It's spear phishing, but they're going after big targets. We're going to show you some real life examples of all those. First real life example I'm going to show you is this one. It's probably the most boring phishing email that you've ever seen. And the amazing part is it works. It works because it's so boring and plain. We have seen very elaborate email messages that don't work as successful as this message right here. Why does it work? Well, because people just assume that, oh yeah, no, I'm like, this looks like I just got an email message. This particular one came in for a company that doesn't even have voicemail, but they had an email that said that they had voicemail coming in. So this particular message went to somebody that wouldn't even have it, but it works. All right, next one we're going to talk about, so these are what general ones look like. Next thing we're talking about is spear phishing. This is when we're going after an individual. So essentially, somebody impersonating somebody else at the company. This is really easy to do. For me just to go to your website, I can find out, usually from your website, I can find out a list of employees of your website, and I can pretend to be one employee emailing another one. You have a list of your vendors. I can pretend to be a vendor emailing one of your employees, and usually you have a list of clients. So I can pretend to be one of your clients emailing one of your people. It's really easy for me to do spear phishing just from the information that I have on your website. And so basically what you're looking for is these are messages that come in specific, let me know because I need you to do something important. There's that sense of urgency, right, coming through. Do you have a minute? I have a company name. I have something that I need you to do, something to transfer some payments, right? So they don't have to come from your person, but I can make an email look like it comes from anybody. It's not difficult for me to make an email look like it comes from anybody in your company, outside your company, a vendor. It takes me no technical skill whatsoever to do that. And so what these are spear phishing. They're going after your team members. All right, another popular one that's come through is basically sending fake invoices. Again, I'm on your website. On your website, you have testimonials from your clients because you're so proud of your client base. And I'm proud of your client base too. But the problem is, it's really easy for me to take that information that's on your website. I find out who your client is. I call your company, and it's really easy for me to say who your accounts receivable person is, because I just call up and say, hey, listen, I need to pay my invoice. Can I talk to your accounts receivable person? You're not going to not let me through. You want me to pay the invoice, right? So now I know who your accounts receivable person is. So I've gone on your website. I found out who your customer is. I found out who your accounts receivable person is. All I have to do is find out who the accounts payable person is on your customer. Send them a fake email with a fake invoice that looks like it's from you, and it goes to your client asking them to pay this invoice. But by the way, hey, we've updated our payment method. Can you please ACH our email, ACH your payment here? Wire transfer your payment here, whatever it may be. That is spear phishing. All right. There's another example, a very common one that we see all the time, and so I'm going to go into this one. You believe it or not, usually every time I do this webinar, there's always somebody reach out and says, yeah, actually, we were a victim of this exact one. It's the gift card one, right? There's something I need you to do. Let me know when you're available. 2 p.m. I have a break. I'll be available. Can you step outside and buy a bunch of gift cards for me? I have a potential client I'm trying to win over. These gift cards are really going to set us apart and really give us what we need to go through. You'd be amazed how often this works. It works all the time. We get this all the time. There's gift cards. We've had office managers go out to stores and buy them. In this case, the person on the other end was smart. This is an actual email from our clients. Change the name to protect the innocent. Sorry, this seems like an odd request. Can you please be a little more specific? In this case, they backed down. Hey, if you consider our request, I don't bother doing it. Because they backed down. They didn't want to be caught, right? So they backed down. Unfortunately, not every client. This is one that went through our training and they were smart enough to catch it. Not everyone is. Let's talk about whaling. Whaling is, I'm going to give you a really, really classic example of whaling. I'm going to go up on your website and I'm going to find out who your CEO is. I'm going to call up your company and I'm going to say, hey, listen, I am with ADP, Paychecks, whatever, UKG, you name it. I want to talk to your human resources department. They may not put you in touch with the human resources department, but all you care about is who the name is. Why do you care who the name is? Because I'm going to go on your website, I'm going to find out who your CEO is, I'm going to find out who your human resources person is, and I'm going to email them and say, hey, I need to update my check for my direct deposit for my payroll. And then your HR person is going to say, hey, okay, I just need you to fill out this form and send it through. And you would think that that'd be enough to trip up the bad guys, but it's not. They actually, please find attached a voided check. They actually sent, the bad guys actually literally sent a voided check to this client for them to pay the payroll. Again, these are real emails that really happened from actual clients. No security breach in this. This is all social engineering. None of this actually breached the security. This is all social engineering. This is why I'm starting with this, because it's so important. Okay, here's your red flags to look for. This is up on our website. This up on our website is a phishing training video. This is about 15 minutes. It is the second most popular video that we have out there. It has thousands of views on this video. It's 15 minutes. Every single employee that you have should go through a phishing training video because it goes through a lot more examples than what I just went through right then. A lot more examples. It's really important that they all go through that. Okay, now let's talk about online safety. Okay, with online safety, what we're concerned with here is people going places that they shouldn't be. But what we're going to start with is just what the behind the internet. We're going to talk about the 3 parts of the internet. There are actually 3 distinct parts and they serve 3 different purposes. The first part is going to be the top part, which is the public part. You're going to see this when you're browsing common sites, as you can see here, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever. These are ones that require authentication, but maybe not dual authentication, and they're more informational. This could be like a news site like CNN.com, Boston.com, those type of things. Then we have the second layer, which is this is the more protected layer. This is where you're going to find things like your financial institutes, where your credit card or your bank or your investment accounts, they're going to be gated and they're going to be secure, but they're going to be in this. So they're going to be in this deep web. Then we have the bad area, right? We have the dark web. The dark web is the part that you really kind of want to stay away from. The dark web is basically where the bad stuff happens. This is where the guns trading happens, the money laundering, human trafficking, you name it, happens in this area. Snowden, when he was releasing information on the government, this is where he released that information, is down in the dark web. It's sort of like a speakeasy. You can't just go there and find it, otherwise some of the bad areas, the NSA and FBI would shut them down. You have to be invited in, and you have to know how to get there, and you have to know what's there. And that's why it's kind of like in the hidden. It's not like dark corners. If the internet were a street, this is the back alley of the bad area of the town. All right. One of the things we're going to talk about, I'm not going to go through all these lists here, online safety, but essentially we want to be careful what you post. I'm going to go into more detail that in just a moment on why you want to be more careful about what you post and what that actually means. Suspicious online links, yes, of course, be careful what you click on, especially when it comes in from a phishing email. We talked about that. Password best practices, we're going to talk about that a little bit in more detail. Two-factor authentication, we're definitely going to talk about that. Talking to people online. Again, assume everybody that you talk to online is not the person that you're talking to, and you always want to have enhanced security. Now, we have an entire 15-minute webinar just on online security. So I only touched on this really quickly, but we have a much more in-depth one on what you should do, going through the steps that you want to go through to keep yourself safe online, because that's where you get yourself in trouble, is online. So it's right on our website. Again, it's free. Go get there. Now, I talked to you about the breach of Facebook and some of the other locations, and I told you that we're going to talk about why you even care about that. So here's a couple of things that are in there. Everything on Facebook is exactly what I need to socially engineer you, or to guess your password, or to get anything from you. It has everything I need. It typically has the street you grew up in. It has your teacher. It has your spouse, your significant other, your maiden name. All of that is up on Facebook. But there's also one other thing that's up on Facebook. Is that when Facebook was breached, what was released was a bunch of usernames and passwords, or potentially usernames and passwords. I can't confirm or deny that, but usernames and passwords. Now, why do I care about your Facebook password? I don't. But what I do care about is that people are creatures of habit, and typically they will use a similar password for everything, including your work account. So when I have the password for your Facebook, I also have the place that you work, and I also have a potential key that I can use to get into your work account. I know your work email address and your work username is probably going to be first initial, last name, first name dot last name dot first name. It's going to be one of those combinations. So now I have half of the key. The other half is a password, which again, now I have part of that password. And that's not just Facebook. I'm picking on them. It could be anything. It could be Best Buy having a breach. It could be Target having a breach. It could be Walmart. It could be anybody. Your users are typically going to use that same key password. It'll be their pet's name, their kid's birthday, their kid's name, anniversary dates, you name it. A lot of that stuff's up on Facebook. That's what I'm going to use to start cracking. I'm going to start trying to use your pet's name, your kid's birthday, all that stuff to try and crack that. That's why your Facebook's important. The other thing too is that people post when they go on vacation on Facebook. This is bad. It's bad because guess what? As a hacker, I'm going to go after that person's account, or I'm going to try and emulate that person while they're on vacation, because I know when those emails come back from the vendor or the customers, that person's not going to be there to respond. That's the perfect opportunity that I have to attack your user. It's because I know they're not around to defend themselves. I know they're not around to see that suspicious email and say, well, wait, this doesn't look right. They're not there. So the point that I'm getting at is that social media is just as important. And here's some key things to look at in social media. The first thing I want to do is on social media, there's these things happening on Facebook that are quizzes. And that's another thing I want you to alert your users to, is these quizzes can be manipulated against you. They're going to ask you questions that are looking for typical security answers. If you look at this, what age will I be married? Can I guess your age? Find a Disney princess? First pet's name's last name. There are all these quizzes that are giving away all the security information that I would need in order to guess the security question to bypass your account. Genius, right? It looks really simple, but you don't know where they're. So one, probably just ignore the questions, but if you have to, make sure they're coming from a source that you trust, right? These are all the typical questions that I'm going to get on a security. You guys have the same security questions that I see on a regular basis. A lot of them are up on Facebook, right? Okay, I'm going to talk about this next slide. Now, when your users are on a website, we want to be careful that when a message pops up, there's only one button that's a safe button to hit here, right? And that button is the one in the upper right-hand corner, the red X. Every other button on here is a bad news. It's going to bring you somewhere or install something or have some payload. Now, this is one of the slides that's been in the slide deck since we've been doing cybersecurity training for, I don't know now, 8 years. The next slide is the one that I want to bring up because this one's also been up here. This is a warning message that pops up that says there's something wrong with your computer. Please call this number. Now, the reason I'm focusing on this one is that we have no less than 5 calls within the last 3 weeks of clients who have called that number and been socially engineered to do something on their computer. You really, really, really have to have your users stop and think. Bring to them, we've literally had 5 within the last 3 weeks. It's all of a sudden it's working, so they're doing more of it. Typically it's coming up as saying Microsoft is alerting you, or it's a AV program or something like that, something that they know. It might be Chase Bank, might be Amazon, whatever. It's coming up with this warning, hey, you have a problem, here's a phone number so that we can fix it. The users get on the phone, call the bad guys walk themselves through the computer like walking through the front door. All of a sudden there's a breach. Again, no security breach. When I say walking through, what they're doing is saying, hey, can you walk me through going to your bank account? Or you can walk me through this. That's the bad news, right? So have them careful and diligent on who they give access to the computer to and certainly who they talk to. Let's talk about passwords and password policy. So the ways the bad guys get into passwords is there's some typical ones that they get it, and number one is to reuse passwords across multiple sites. I talked about when Facebook or social media or any website is breached, so they're going to have a list of usernames and passwords. In fact, those passwords are reused. That's your that's a major problem, using the same passwords. Security questions, we talked about that. Social engineering, we talked about that. Dictionary attacks, that's when they take known words and start using it like a brute force attack, trying to get into a password. They have these list of known words, they're going to try combinations of that. Guessing simple passwords. It's sad how many simple passwords are still in use today by people, and obviously the hackers know it. So what are some things that you can do on passwords? So one, change your password regularly, right? Number two, never share your password. This is extremely important for those of you who have team members that are working from home. They have a habit of sharing their password with the other people in their family, and that's bad news, right? Make sure they never share the password, right? Don't use personal information in your password. Don't use those pets' names, those birthdays, those anniversaries, all of those things. Turn off password autofill on the browsers. When you have the password autofill in your browser, it's storing those passwords in that local browser in a hash, and the hacker is waiting to go in there and attack those. Make security questions stronger. This is one of my favorite tricks, and I'll get ahead of myself a little bit. One of my favorite tricks on the security questions, instead of just answering the question, right? What was your first grade teacher's name? Who was your best friend? Add in a special character in there. Add in a question mark, a dollar sign, something like that. Don't just use regular alpha characters. Use alphanumeric characters or alphanumeric and symbols. Definitely lock down your security questions. Doesn't take any extra effort to do that. Password resets. Be careful of password resets. Make sure that they actually from the actual entity that needs the password reset. Here's some tricks on customizing it. So it's a little bit, each password's a little bit different. Here's one of using a phrase. So basically, mixing it up so that each account has a separate password to it that's unique. So you can see the different spelling of Amazon, Google, and Netflix in there, right? Complex passwords are tougher to break. So you want to have all of your passwords set to complex. This is a setting that we can do at the AD level, at the Active Directory level, to make sure that all users are forced to use a complex password. Don't use identifiable information. We talked about that. You don't use common dictionary words. Goes back to the dictionary attack we talked about. Use a phrase instead of a sentence. This one is really, really important and powerful. So instead of a password of $123 $, if you did a phrase of, hey, my favorite food is chicken parm, that is so much more powerful. And then if you take that and put in special characters and numbers in there, it makes it more powerful. And you can see one of the other hints that you could do is just take the first letter of each one and change it up that way. And now you have a smaller password that's actually more complex, but you can remember it because it's based on a phrase. Another thing that I like to promote is using password managers. A password manager is going to allow you to randomly generate passwords that make no rhyme or reason or sense to anything, and allows you to keep unique passwords at each location, and it remembers those passwords for you. So you don't have to remember all those passwords, which makes it so much easier to have randomly generated passwords. We have an entire webinar up on our website just on passwords. It's a 10-15 minute webinar. I highly recommend you watch that as well. It goes into a deeper dive. Okay, multi-factor authentication. If there's nothing you take away from this seminar other than this, you need to have multi-factor authentication in place at your organization everywhere you can put it. No matter any option you have to put multi-factor authentication in, do it. From your login to your computers up to your Netflix account, anywhere that you can do it. Different types of multi-factor authentication. One is a knowledge factor, that's asking you a question of something that you know. Possession, that's the most popular one. That would be like your mobile phone where you get a text message or you get a application that pops up. Biometric, that would be like a thumbprint, like a location. That is where you're locked down to only people from a certain region can lock in. And then a time factor. That means that people can only log in within a certain window of time, otherwise they can't log in at all. All right. Setting up two-factor authentication, especially on Office 365, is completely free, and you should definitely do it. And if you get your scorecards from us, you will know that it's not done and you should do it. We have up on our website videos that will walk you through it. It literally takes 3 minutes to set it up. We have one-pagers that have QR codes. We have tried to make everything as easy as possible to get two-factor authentication up on Microsoft Office. This is so important. This is where the bad guys are going to attack you first, is through your Office 365. And once they get into your email, they have gotten into the keys of the kingdom. This is what they want. All right, next thing I want to talk about is that an application is better than getting a text message for two-factor authentication. I'm going to tell you why. Think of the old days for some of us who, when you used to be at home and you had two phones that were landlines in your house, you pick up one in the kitchen, you pick up one in the living room, you could hear each other talk, right? So when there was a breach at T-Mobile, what happened was the phone numbers and the SIM numbers got released. And once that happened, the bad guys now had the two pieces that they needed to eavesdrop on all of your calls and text messages. So what they could do is they did a two-factor authentication request. The text message came in, it came to you, and it came to them at the same time. And so that's why an app is better, because it eliminates that possibility of something happen. Next thing I want to talk about, so I talked about two-factor authentication is incredibly important. I'm going to actually talk about two ways that the bad guys have been able to get around two-factor authentication. I want you to let your team know about this. Number one, first and foremost, is fatigue attacks. Oh, sorry, that first one was the first way that they get around it. This is the second way they get around it. Fatigue attack. A fatigue attack is basically one of the bad guys going up, I'll say Office 365, going up to Office 365, they have the username and the password by someone social engineering or whatever, and then they log in and they get blocked by that two-factor authentication. And so what they do is they send the request for the two-factor authentication. Your user comes up, looks at it, says, I didn't do this, puts it down. Then they do it again. User does the same thing. Then they do it again and again and again. And they keep doing that over and over and over again until finally the user gets to the point where they're like, you know what? This has got to be something I'm doing that's causing this. I'm going to just say yes and I'll let them in. And so once they do that, they've just given the bad guys access into the account. Okay, let's talk about security policies really quick. We're going to talk BYOD, bring your own device. So back when COVID first happened, we get it. Everybody had to kind of say, hey, what do you have? Because we need you to use something to do work, right? And so they just did it. And some people said, well, I have this computer at home and everything. The problem that is that opened up the gateways of security, because what was on their computer, once they VPN in and connected to your network, it's now on your network. You don't know what's on their computer. You don't have AV control on it. You don't have patch management control on it. You don't have security control on it. You can't do password management on it. You don't know what else is on their network. So it's really important that you get to the point where your users are not doing their own devices for your network and your business, that you have business approved appliances that are in use that you can control in your environment so that you know that they are secure and they meet your business security standards. This is extremely important. It's very difficult, if not impossible, for you to manage users' home networks. All of a sudden that user gets up, goes somewhere, The spouse comes down, starts using it. The kids come over, start using it. It's an open forum. It's a family device, and the family uses it. You want to have your own business device in place for that security. The other thing I'll bring up is that we're getting requests from a lot of clients for help writing security policies. So what we did is we put together a whole bunch of templates for security policies. This is it's a one-time chargeable thing, but we'll give you these templates that you can then modify and use in-house. So if you want these templates, reach out to us and our team. More than happy to get in touch with you and get these to you so you can use them as a basis. We're starting to see more and more cybersecurity insurance claims require these, but more importantly, some of you who want to be more secure are actually, or maybe you're going through a SOC, NIST, CMMC, whatever, you're going to need these security policies. That's where these are in place. All right, I want to also talk about our advanced security division. So basically, security has become such an important role that we've actually created an entirely separate organization that is part of us, but at an arm's length, that provides advanced security. A lot of our clients have been asking us for more real-time security, managed security services. They're looking for threat protections. They're looking for basically real-time incident response, security assessments, cybersecurity audits, true penetration testing, breach remediation, litigation support, all those advanced offerings. So we said, okay, we should be doing this. So that's what that's what we've put together. We've already had a huge response from our clients on this. So I'm going to going through all these, I don't want to go through these again for you to make through. So basically what they are is this is our advanced security team. It is still an extension of us, but we intentionally keep it at arm's length. And the reason that we do that is so that we can meet, or you can meet, the compliance standards. The nice part is we work together as a team. The goal is to get you secure and keep you secure, and also make sure that you have met all of the security standards that you have, whether it be for a private equity firm that you might be partner with, might be an insurance claim, or you might be going for some certifications, or you just know the threat landscape that's out there and you want to protect yourself. That's what our security division is for. Okay, so this is why you want to have your employees trained. Basically, it's going to save time and money. It's going to keep them secure. It's going to retain customers' trust by not having to tell them that you had a breach. It's also going to give you peace of mind in what you're doing. All right. Let's recap what we went over today. So talked about the current risk landscape. We talked about the network defense. We talked about protecting yourself, and we talked about online safety, and we gave you real-life examples. Talked about designing cybersecurity controls to keep in place, and then the fundamentals involved in reinforcing that security. We have weekly cybersecurity tips. I highly recommend that you have your entire team sign up for these tips and get them. It's important. Every single week we send out a new tip to your team to reinforce it. Again, it's over and it's like going to that gym, like we talked about, over and over. These are different. It's a different one every week, and you're going to see it, and you'll see it'll be something that'll enlighten in your team and say, oh, all right, yeah, I just saw that. I got to make sure I'm prepared for it. I promised you a free cybersecurity assessment at the end. Here it is. For those of you who are actual clients of ours, this is actually we cover the majority of this in your cybersecurity scorecard. But those of you watching this that are not clients, there's a free cybersecurity test that you can go through right here. Everything that we have and we have gone over is up on our website. This video will be up on our website as well for you to use as training. We have a dedicated page just for cybersecurity training. We have this comprehensive webinar, but then we also have smaller ones that were more focused and detailed, so you can watch them, deploy them as needed. That is everything that I had to cover. I hope you have an amazing day. We're also going to stay here for some Q&A, so what we'll do is stick around. If there's something that I think everybody will benefit, we'll talk to them live. If not, we'll just respond back to the Q&As individually and email you as it's going. That's it.